So the Israelis have gone and attacked Jenin refugee camp again in the West Bank. I put together a thread on Twitter just earlier, and I wanted to walk you guys through it. It's got almost 1 million views now. And I mean, this is outrageous. They have launched their largest attack, their deadliest attack in 20 years. Okay? They sent over 1,000 Israeli troops into Jenin refugee camp. Just to give you guys an idea of what, you know, the size of the camp. I'm not talking about the town Jenin. I'm talking about the refugee camp, okay, which is only a small piece or part of Jenin. Jenin refugee camp is about half a square kilometer. Half a square kilometer. You got 14,000 plus people living crammed into half a square kilometer. I looked this up just for the sake of giving you an example in the US, okay? The closest that comes to that kind of population density was Gutenberg in New Jersey. And even then, it's still lower than Jenin, right? So Jenin refugee camp, 33,000 people crammed into half per square kilometer. So let me show you what the Israelis did. This is the state that they left the camp in. And yes, those are bulldozers. Your eyes are not playing tricks on you. They literally invaded with armored vehicles. So we're talking armored personnel carriers, tanks, jeeps, planes, helicopters, jets, everything. They sent 1,000 troops in there. This is what it looks like. Look at this column of vehicles going in. Here's another video. You can see them invading with their bulldozers, right? Which I'll get to in a second. Yeah, there you see the bulldozers. And here more and more, it's just endless. It's absolutely endless, okay? And then of course, you can see them here, they're bombing the camp with the jets. You know, they're fighting terrorism, right? Like they want you to believe, which is ridiculous. I mean, first of all, this is an invasion, you know, if from perspective of international law, the Israelis are literally, you know, invading the place, even if you accept the partition plan, even if you accept it. This is the West Bank. What are they doing in there? The Israelis going door to door and kicking families out of their homes. You can see here, they've got people with their hands up inside their own home. Can you imagine somebody comes into your house with machine guns? Not somebody, a professional army, one of the most powerful armies in the world, comes into your house and sticks guns in your family's face and kicks you out of your house. How would you like that? I bet you wouldn't. I think most people wouldn't. And the Israelis were also sending text messages to Palestinians, telling them, get out of your homes, leave your homes. There's so many people who had to flee. It's in the thousands, okay? So you got thousands of people. Just look at this video here. So, I mean, the sad irony, which I'm forced to point out, and again, I want this to sink in. These are refugees, still in their own country, refugees being turned into refugees again. So it's not enough that the Israelis kicked them out of their homes in 1948, which is why you have Jenin refugee camp. Again, think about that. You got a refugee camp in the same country, okay? Which again, in war, you have people displaced internally and externally, right? But again, I want you to think about how sad that is, that you have people who went to this camp in the first place because they lost their original homes in 1948. The Israelis took them. And now, once again, the Israelis kick them out of these homes. I mean, how sick is that? How sick is that?
الاسعاف نادى بالسماعه قال اخلوا الدور وموقفين اليهود يعني عارفين اخلوا الدور خلي الدور مفتح يعني خلينا اغراضنا وعينا مالنا كلياته بالدور.
طب هسه انتوا وين؟
نعم.
وين جيتوا؟
جينا هون على المستشفى.
ليه؟
هم كلونا على المستشفى.
By the way, the the irony is that, the Israelis want you to think that the resistance fighters in the camp, who are so-called terrorists, that they're not popular among the population, right? That the population, the civilians, they don't like them. That's not true, first of all. And yes, yesterday, as people were leaving their homes, they were leaving money, food, and notes, and telling the resistance fighters, help yourselves. Even if the entire house falls apart, it's yours. Do what you want. So let me show. I mean, more of these scenes. It's endless. You are people like literally with nothing but their kids, just holding their kids. They're in their pajamas, right? Look at that. That's so degrading, honestly. And then, of course, people fight back because they're not going to tolerate this. Here's an Israeli Jeep. Here's another video. So that's an IED, improvised explosive device. Listen to the ferocity of this battle. Just listen. I mean, I find this so funny, man, because, well, I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to that in a second why it's funny. But I want to show you some again, here's the Israeli democracy, right, that they tell you about. Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. This is why they destroyed a camera crew's equipment here. Just look at this Israeli down there. You can see him. He opens the door of the Jeep, and then he just uses this camera. You see the microphone and the camera on the left, on the far left. He just starts using it for target practice. That's how much the Israelis respect journalists, right? And of course, you'll remember they killed an Al Jazeera reporter in the same exact refugee camp last year. Look at this. Look, he opens the door, and now he starts firing. Big tough guy. There it is. He keeps going till it's destroyed. And then leaves, right? So I don't think that argument that, oh, I thought it was a gun, I was under duress, is going to hold. You if you're under threat, and you have no business being there in the first place, but even if you want to buy this nonsense that, oh my God, their lives were threatened by the dangerous journalists and their microphones, you don't open the door, to start shooting casually like that when you're under duress. The Israelis are here to destroy people's houses. Look at them. They're bringing bulldozers with them. Bulldozers. This is their form of sick, cruel punishment, right? They'll destroy your house in front of you. Here's another video. You can see it just like it. You have to understand that the scale of the destruction is so bad. It's not just that they went in and bulldozed the house. No, they bulldozed the infrastructure of the goddamn place. It's already a refugee camp. What kind of infrastructure is it going to have anyway, right? But obviously Jenin's been there for a long time. The water, the electricity gone, the streets destroyed. Look at this. Look at the video. They're turning people's homes into construction sites. Look at that, Jesus Christ. This is where your tax dollars go, It's the truth. It's the truth. Remember, the Israelis, up until Ukraine became the next hot thing, the Israelis were the largest recipient of U.S. military aid. Okay, so that's what is it, 3.8 billion per year. That's what your money's going to. Look at the scale of the destruction. It's truly beyond words. It's unrecognizable. That's what people who live there are saying. Unrecognizable. Here, they don't even leave animals alone, you know. Humans, animals, that's just everybody. I mean, I wrote on Twitter that they left it looking like an apocalyptic wasteland. Just look at that. It's like something from Mad Max. Look, here's more. You got the streets literally on fire. Just, it's gone. There's nothing left. Nothing left. I think I've made my point, but I really can't overstate this enough, you know? I really can't stress this enough. Here's in the daylight, so you can see a bit better. This is 36 hours after the Israelis have, you know, have done playing with it. The last time they did something like this was 20 years ago, right? So I think back then it was called Operation Defensive Shield or some rubbish. And, you know, obviously now the Israelis go in every month. They go into Jenin, just like they go into Syria every other week, you know, or they go into Gaza every other week. Why is that? It's because these places, in particular, they're unable to tame them. They're, you know, Gaza, Syria, the West Bank, is particularly Nablus and Jenin. They're not intimidated by Israel. They don't care about Israel. They are going to kick the Israelis out as long as, you know, however long it takes, no matter what it takes. So that's why the Israelis, they inflict this kind of damage and punishment on the local population, right? So Netanyahu, because he's under a lot of pressure at home, poor Netanyahu, you know, he's got all these Israelis protesting against him. And you recall that he has his party, Likud, they have a coalition with the far right. Now, I've told you this before, and I'll say this again as a side note. Far right Israeli, leftist Israeli, liberal Zionist, I don't care. These are all the same thing. They're colonizers, period. But the fact is that these far right Israelis, right, that Netanyahu has got in bed with, they really, really, really want to just decimate Palestine, you know, at a faster pace. It's not that the liberal Zionists don't want that too. They do, and they do live in Palestine at the expense of Palestinians. It's just the far right ones, they kind of want to get the job done faster, right? So he's under pressure from both of them, right? From the so-called left in Israel and then the far right in Israel. And so he thinks that by going into Jenin and uprooting the fighters once and for all, which is what his stated goal was, right? That was the Israeli stated goal with this particular operation, as opposed to the other ones, right? Was that they're going to uproot them once and for all. They're going to finish either, you know, in a graveyard or in prison. So they failed. After 48 hours, the Israelis have to leave and withdraw. And I told you, they come in with 1,000 troops. Jeeps, bulldozers, you name it, they brought it. You name it, they brought it. And you have to keep in mind, this is one of the largest armies in the world, almost $4 billion, so $3.8 billion every single year. That's your money going to this occupation. They have nuclear weapons. This is an army with nuclear weapons, literally with nuclear weapons, with drones, with jets, you name it. And they are fighting against people in their, you know, who are teenagers between 17 and like 25 years old. Most of the fighters in Jenin, the resistance fighters, they're my age. They're young men. You know, so like I said, between 17 and 25, 27, this is the, you know, this is the age group we're talking about. And they they get their asses kicked and have to retreat. And that's why people were celebrating. Look at them. As opposed to the wasteland, the apocalyptic wasteland that Israel just created. Look at how people in Jenin were happy after the Israelis had to pull out. right? So that's why it's funny. That's why it's funny, right? Because the Israelis have trouble taking on a bunch of teenagers and men in young men in their 20s. So, that's why it's funny. And you can be sure that that Netanyahu, he got permission, so to speak. He got the nod. He got the nod from the US and the UK. You know why? It's not that the US and UK usually object or usually say something. No, on the contrary. But the scale of this is so insane, right? Compared to the other attacks and the usual assaults. And they just say there's like zero condemnation, right? Just imagine this was a Ukrainian town. I know I keep drawing this parallel and I don't give a crap and I'm going to keep goddamn saying it. Imagine this was a Ukrainian town and the Russians had just done this. There would be outcry and outrage and people going batshit on the news, in the papers 24/7, right? And maybe they should, because this is outrageous. But the point is here that this happened, and it happened in Palestine, done by the Israelis with American approval, American weapons, American money, British political, the cover that Britain provides and the UK provide, where you're not allowed to criticize Israel. You shut the hell up about Israel. If the BBC can't even say a word about Israel, that's how they give their approval and their consent, right? And Netanyahu is his ilk are openly saying now, this idea that you're going to have a Palestinian state is gone, and you have to understand something. This doesn't mean that 20 years ago, the Israelis, they really meant it about having a two-state solution. No, that was a ruse. That was a farce. It was a charade. It was an act. They put on an act. They pretended that there's going to be a two-state solution. It's nonsense. They never wanted one. It's just that now the veil has been lifted, and they just openly say, yeah, screw you. There's not going to be a Palestinian state. Like as if you have to, to get on your knees and kiss the ring and beg the Israelis to give you a state. No, but they do have military superiority in this case. And as I mentioned, all this money and political cover in the West. And with that, they wield it against the Palestinians. And, just to show you something else that Israel is having to deal with now, in addition to having, to being humiliated and defeated. Jesus Christ, you guys remember 2 weeks ago, what happened 2 weeks ago when they went into Jenin? You would have thought they learned their lesson. When they went into Jenin 2 weeks ago, same place, the Palestinians, they destroyed them. They made minced meat out of the Israelis. Minced meat. I did a video on this. I did a thread. You had like columns upon columns and rows upon rows of destroyed Israeli vehicles. They even had to bring in the medical helicopters and start evacuating their troops and then pretended that they had no casualties. Just completely humiliated and caught off guard, right? So those were with IEDs. The Palestinians had placed IEDs, improvised explosive devices, all over the camp. The Israelis, they don't. By the time it happened, it was too late. They had no clue what hit them. But today, this was a different reality. This was a different battle, right? A different battle. And even though the Israelis in the end had to retreat, look at the devastation. And to show you what I was saying a few moments ago about this new reality that Israel has to contend with and is unable to deal with, we are talking about the West Bank, okay? Maybe I should pull up a map again to show you guys what I'm talking about, because Jenin, you have to understand, is this is Jenin, okay? So we're talking about the West Bank here. You can see it outlined, right? This is basically like what their idea for Palestine. You get a piece over here and a piece over here, and it's like a cake. Carve it up. Anyway, we're talking about the West Bank here. Okay, Jenin is up here. Jenin and the West Bank, they're under the rule of the PA, the Palestinian Authority, or Fatah. And in Gaza, down here in Gaza, Gaza's ruled by Hamas, okay? So these are both Palestinian groups. They both have their own armed wings and so on, but they've had big differences, to put it mildly. They're separate factions. Today, however, after the Israelis attacked Jenin, okay, so again, that's up here, Gaza down here started firing rockets into Israel. That's the new reality, is that if you attack one of us, all of us are going to jump in and we're going to start, we're going to lay into you for what you did. So just to show you here, this is Gaza, Hamas firing rockets at Israel after the destruction that Israel caused in Jenin, which I just showed you. Here, take a look. You can see on the left 4 rockets coming up. Right? So not only that, but there's a man in Tel Aviv. So this is a Palestinian man. He took a vehicle and he rammed it into Israeli settlers, and he injured 8 of them. When did this happen? The day after the Israelis attacked Jenin. I told you about this pattern the last time. Every time Israel attacks Jenin or Nablus or Gaza, the next day the Palestinians are going to retaliate. And here's the interesting thing. As I just said, this is a lone wolf. A lone wolf. A young man, not connected to any group, no political ideology, there's no manifesto, there's no statement. Action, just action. Retaliation. Self-defense. Okay? So you had 8 Israeli settlers injured, and then some Israeli, they're all allowed to carry guns. And you have to remember, every Israeli, male, female, they are in the Israeli army. They are trained killers. Trained killers. Every single one of them. It's mandatory in Israel. You have to do military service. Service. Who are you serving? In any case, someone just executed him, just killed him. Right? So the point here is that Israel can't deal with this because they got lone wolves, guys who, how do you plan against something like that? You can't do it. You cannot do it because you don't know who this person is. You don't know what they're going to do, where they're going to do it, when they're going to do it. You just know that it's going to happen at some point. But the Israelis don't seem to care. It's like, okay, we'll just go attack Jenin, destroy it, and whatever happens the next day happens. It's like they don't even care about their own citizens, apparently. And, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that if we talk about the West Bank up here, right? So I mentioned Jenin, but you have to understand that in Jenin and in the West Bank in general, you have the presence of multiple factions, right? So forget Hamas for a second. Hamas is in Gaza. I'm talking about the West Bank. You're going to have people from PIJ, so Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Their armed wing is Saray al-Quds. Okay, so it's true. You're actually going to have in both West Bank and Gaza. But once again, my point still stands that the Qassam brigades, Saray al-Quds. There's no. You cannot differentiate anymore between these factions, even outside of Palestine. Like if we talk about Hezbollah in Lebanon, right, or Syria, right, they have united now as one front, and you saw that about a month ago. What happened? Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, all of them at the same time attacked Israel. They responded because Israel had assaulted Jenin, I think it was. I'm losing track. I'm literally losing track. I have a diary that I keep, and every time they go into Jenin, I write it down. I have it here. But my point again is that you have a reality Israel is unable to deal with. You cannot deal with this. And despite their best efforts to isolate Syria, bomb Syria every week, destroy Syria, help Al-Qaeda in Syria, just because they want to destroy the government there, despite Israel's efforts to malign Hezbollah and malign Hamas and get their European allies to ban them and call them terrorist groups, these organizations, these resistance groups are stronger than ever. Compare that to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Israel is losing. And you cannot fix this. The only way you fix it is you go home and you leave Palestine, period. Just like the French in Algeria. You pack your shit and you go home. It's not my opinion or something that I decide. It's just the reality. You can see it. The Israelis attack Palestinians. Palestinians respond because the Palestinians, this is their land. You understand? They literally have no place else to go. You already put them in a goddamn refugee camp. Where else can they go? They don't even have passports, nationality. It's a nightmare just trying to travel. Yeah, I mean, meanwhile, Israelis got like they already have political cover and can travel anywhere they like. Many of them have dual citizenship, some even triple. I mean, even if they didn't have any of these perks, shall we say, human rights, meaning human rights, even if they didn't have, multiple passports, this doesn't matter because they still have the upper hand militarily, politically, etc., right? So they are in a dominant position, and they are crapping on the Palestinians, and they have no intent whatsoever to give them a state or step aside and allow them to just live in goddamn peace. No. It's we're gonna assault you every week in Jenin and Nablus and Gaza. Those who are living under the occupation. So these assaults aside, just the day-to-day oppression of the occupation. It's just keep going, So that's it. That's the speech. But seriously, this is very, very bad what they've done in Jenin. And the fact that no one, cares to even condemn it, I mean, is outrageous. Let me show you. This is from the Palestinian ambassador. And he went on. This is the Palestinian ambassador to the UK. Okay. Zamlot. So he goes on BBC, and Jesus Christ, I mean, you already know what they're going to say to him. Just listen to this crap.
Of aggression, which is occupation. When they sabotage your entire life, when they deny you movement, when they steal your land, when they kill your children, of course you'll have reactions. So you want to focus on the reaction.
I'm trying to understand what the official Palestinian view of Palestinian militant activity is. For example, recent polling suggests that the vast majority of Palestinians, upwards of 80%, say that they are against the arrest and the surrender of members of these armed groups. I'm just wondering whether you support the actions of these Palestinian militant groups.
Tim, where are you going with this?
Because I'm trying to work out where this conflict might end up.
What conflict? There is no conflict. There is an occupation. There is one army that is the fourth strongest on earth, that is nuclear. Where are you going with this? That the problem is Palestinian violence? That is the issue? No. The Palestinian people, as per international law, have the right to protect themselves. And it's we
Have they
who
the right
seek,
to shoot settlers?
It's we who seek the international intervention.
Yes, they do. What do you mean settlers? The international law is very clear, man. If you go into Palestine, into the West Bank, and you build a house or a building, well, I don't care if the government does it for you, the Israeli government, or you do it yourself. The point here is that you are invading someone's country, and the UN and every authority and NGO on earth has said clearly this is illegal. You cannot do this under the Geneva Convention, under the UN Charter. These settlements have no legitimacy whatsoever, period. No, none. Israel's annexation, of Jerusalem, null and void. Those are the exact terms of the UN Security Council, null and void. So, yeah, you do have the right to shoot settlers. You know why? Because you are invading their country. And every single Israeli is in the military. They're trained killers. They all take part in the occupation. If a Russian goes and builds a house in Zaporizhia or Crimea, you think the Ukrainians care about that? I mean, Crimea is a different issue. We've discussed this before. It was Russia, and during the time of the Soviet Union, it transferred and so on. The point here is that just right now in the climate, with the war that's happening in Ukraine, do you think anyone is going to cry because a Russian built a house somewhere in Ukraine and the Ukrainians blew it away with a HIMARS missile? No, they'll cheer him on and say, bravo, this is your right, and so on and so on. So what is this crap here? Why is he like crying for settlers? Just listen to the rest of his response.
It's we who seek international presence. It's we who went to the International Court of Justice and to ICC, International Criminal Court, to try and investigate this. And guess who is blocking us? It's Israel and its allies, the US and the UK and the rest of the West. So we want to see the full enforcement of international law. Let international judges decide and answer your questions, not me.
Let me just say something else, right? In some states in the U.S., you have these stand your ground laws. So if somebody comes into your house, you can blast them away with whatever you got, right? You blast them away. So for those of you in the U.S., right? That's if somebody enters your house, like, and you have that right, because you know every man's home is his castle. What do you think a Palestinian feels like then? Like, why should they tolerate somebody coming into their land, taking their land, building on their land? Why should they tolerate that? Especially if the international law, not just somebody's, you know, their internal affairs or laws dictate as such. International law says, you know, that this is illegal. They have no right to be there. Their presence is illegal. Their buildings are illegal. Every single thing about the occupation is illegal. You know, maybe I can get through to people that way and try to, you know, compare it. But again, as I said, it's much, much, much worse. You know, if you think somebody coming to your home with home invasion is bad, think about this crap that I just showed you. You know, somebody bulldozing your house in front of you, kicking you out of your house, making you a refugee a second goddamn time. I mean, Jesus Christ. People have limits, you know. People's patience has limits. Here's the same ambassador, Palestinian ambassador to the UK. He went on CNN. Also, great response. Take a look.
Rights organization, Amnesty. Thus, Israel is in a constant state of aggression, and therefore the Palestinian people are in a constant state of self-defense, of resisting these illegalities. Not the other way around, because we're hearing the U.S. administration all the time talking about Israel's right of self-defense. What about our right for self-defense, Alex? And the U.S. and the West holds completely different standards to the Palestinians than the rest of the world. Think of Ukraine. Think what is happening now. Can you imagine the U.S. president, for instance, coming out and saying that Russia has a right to self-defense in Ukraine? Can you imagine the American president saying that the Ukrainian resistant fighters are terrorists? Can you imagine a scenario where the U.S. administration would block the Ukrainians from taking Russia to the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice, as they are doing with us? I'm saying this because the issue is not what Israel is doing, because it has been doing this for 75 years. The issue is the impunity. And the issue is this double standards of the international community. Crimes are being reported, including in Jenin, by the United Nations. The World Health Organization just released a damning report of the Israeli deliberate targeting of hospitals, of medics, of ambulances.
Speaking of which, I don't need to tell you, but if you're happy, you know, if you want to see the video, I'm happy to show it. What do you think the Israelis did to the hospital in Jenin? They threw tear gas outside. They shot live bullets at the hospital. I mean, just think of this behavior. Please think again. I know it's a lot to process, but you have, you know, this is American money financing this, giving weapons. So you know, these Israeli colonizers can shoot at hospitals, kick people out of their homes, bulldoze their houses. I mean, I think I've made the point enough, you know, enough times. It's just it warrants repeating. Let me show you someone who actually has a spine, in UK politics. This is from Parliament, okay? So in the House of Commons. Corbyn.
Today in Jenin, as an example of the occupation, there are in Jenin 14,000 people in a refugee camp that is less than 0.4 square kilometers. 14,000 people in less than half a square kilometer of land. And the Israeli Defense Force says it's not targeting civilians. It's impossible to use any kind of weaponry against the population there without targeting civilians. More have died, more bitterness, more hatred, and more problems come down the road. Those people all around the world who want to support the Palestinian people are not anti-Semitic. They're not anti-Israeli groups, but what they do want is justice for the Palestinian people. That surely would be a much better and much stronger message to send out from this House today, rather than the attempt to close down free speech in this country.
Here's another MP, so Richard Bergen. Take a listen.
Since 2015, the government has sold £500 million worth of arms to Israel, and UK arms have been implicated in previous atrocities against Palestine. So can the Minister categorically say if any of that military equipment has been used in Israel's assaults on the Jenin refugee camp? And doesn't this attack again show why the government should suspend all arms sales to Israel until it abides by international law?
Elbit Systems, you know, they make weapons in the UK, and they like to advertise their weapons as being battle tested. Guess who they were tested on, in what battlefield? Palestine, of course, right? So you know, I think that sort of wraps it up, and Netanyahu is already saying that he's not finished with Jenin and he's going to go in again. I've no doubt. But you know, Jeremy Corbyn a few moments ago saying that there's more bitterness and more hatred. Yeah, he's right. He's right. But that's the Israelis' fault. You know, they're the ones who are behaving like this, and it's only normal that people are going to rise up. One last note that I'll say on this is that the Israelis thought, after taking Palestine in 1948, that with time they will experience less resistance from the Palestinian native population. And actually the opposite has happened, because all of the people who were fighting against the Israelis as they invaded, keep in mind, they were born after or around the time of 2002. Okay? So that, which is the last time, as I mentioned, they went in this hard and heavy on Jenin. So, you know, with time, it's actually only getting worse for the Israelis in every way, internally, right? So West Bank and then Gaza, and then from Iran getting stronger, Syria getting stronger, Hezbollah. It's only going to get worse from here for them. They are not going to fix the solution except by leaving, period.